6 months ago, American forces pulled Venezuela's president out of Caracas and flew him to a New York jail. The government he left behind did not fall. It handed power to his own vice president. And this week, her interim mandate ran out, with no election in sight. So what did the most dramatic capture of a sitting head of state in decades actually change?
Here is what is verified. On January 3, 2026, United States forces seized Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, in Caracas and transported them to face drug trafficking charges in New York. Washington calls it a lawful operation against a narco-trafficking network. Critics, including officials at the United Nations, call it an abduction that tears at the rules protecting every sovereign state. 2 days later, Venezuela's Supreme Tribunal ordered Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to take over as acting president. There was no invasion force in the streets, no collapse of the state. The same government simply continued, minus one man.
That last detail is the key to everything that followed. Because 6 months later, the honest way to judge this story is a scorecard. The questions Venezuelans and outsiders keep asking are concrete. Who actually rules now? Is the oil flowing, and for whose benefit? Are political prisoners free? Why isn't the Nobel Prize winner the president? Did Venezuela leave the orbit of Cuba, Russia, and China? And are people going home? Take them one at a time, because the answers point in different directions. Start with who rules. Delcy Rodriguez is a change of face, and only partly a change of system. She spent years inside Maduro's inner circle as his vice president and foreign minister. The courts that blessed her promotion are the same courts. The military command, the intelligence services, and the security apparatus that rights groups accuse of years of repression remain largely in place. Her interim mandate was supposed to be a bridge to something. Asked when Venezuelans will vote for a new president, she has offered no date. Her answer, when pressed, amounted to, I don't know, someday. Now the oil. This is where the most measurable change happened. In late January, Rodriguez signed an overhaul of the hydrocarbon rules that ended decades of tight state control, inviting private and foreign companies back into the fields on far friendlier terms. It reversed a policy identity that Hugo Chavez built his revolution on. Western majors moved fast. Chevron deepened its joint ventures with the state oil company, and by industry estimates, now accounts for roughly a quarter of national output. Shell and other companies have been negotiating their way back in. Export tracking suggests shipments climbed from a few 100,000 barrels a day in January to more than 1 million by late spring. The money world followed. In April, the International Monetary Fund resumed dealings with Caracas for the first time since 2019. But read the fine print of this opening. Washington keeps leverage over sanctions relief and oil licenses, which means Venezuela's recovery runs partly on American permission. And a bigger oil income does not tell you who pockets it. The new rules came with transparency questions that nobody in power has answered. More barrels are verified. Cleaner government is not. Question 3. The prisoners. Releases began within days of the capture, and they are real. By early March, the Venezuelan legal aid group, Foro Penal, had verified more than 600 political prisoners freed, helped along by an amnesty law passed in February. But the same group counted more than 500 people still behind bars. Many of the freed walked out with conditions attached: open investigations, travel bans, reporting requirements. Human Rights Watch put it bluntly: releasing prisoners is not the same as dismantling the machine that imprisoned them. And that machine, they say, still stands. Which brings us to the most awkward question of all. Maria Corina Machado won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2025 as the face of Venezuela's democratic opposition. Millions saw her as the rightful winner of the disputed 2024 election, which she was barred from even entering. So why isn't she the president now? Because the capture did not hand power to the opposition. It handed power to the ruling party's second in command, and Washington, by multiple accounts, has been content with that. Reporting indicates the American administration has praised Rodriguez's business-friendly reforms and has actively discouraged Machado from returning to the country. The woman with the Nobel Prize waits outside. The woman from Maduro's cabinet signs the oil deals.
Question 5. Did Venezuela switch sides? Washington demanded exactly that. Cut ties with Cuba, Russia, China, and Iran, and make America the oil partner of choice. 6 months in, the realignment is partial and transactional. American and European companies are back in the oil fields, and Caracas now negotiates with Washington instead of denouncing it. But Rodriguez has publicly resisted the idea of a Venezuela run on American instructions, and she keeps demanding an end to all sanctions. The old relationships have been downgraded, layered over, and renegotiated. There is no verified evidence they have been severed. And the people? Nearly 8 million Venezuelans left during the crisis years. The capture raised an obvious hope. Maybe now they come home. The best evidence so far is sobering. When the UN Refugee Agency surveyed Venezuelans across host countries this spring, 65% said they did not wish to return. Only about 9% intended to. The reasons are not mainly about politics at the top. They are about jobs, income, and safety on the ground. Meanwhile, deportation flights from the United States kept landing in Caracas. Return as policy, running ahead of return as choice. Then, in late June, the ground itself gave a verdict on ordinary life. 2 massive earthquakes struck within seconds of each other, killing more than 2,500 people by confirmed counts, with thousands still missing. The disaster produced a scene unthinkable 2 years ago. American rescue teams working on Venezuelan soil at the government's welcome, alongside crews from dozens of countries. It also exposed how thin the state remains underneath the new diplomacy. Overwhelmed hospitals, fragile infrastructure, and in one widely reported case, deported migrants who died in a Caracas hotel hours after being flown home. The earthquake did not settle whether life is better. It showed how little cushion Venezuelans still have.
So, score the 6 months honestly. Changed? The oil sector is open and pumping again. The IMF door is open. Hundreds of prisoners are out, and Caracas talks to Washington instead of shouting at it. Unchanged, the security state, the courts, hundreds still detained, and opposition still locked out, and no date for an election. Unproven, that daily life, wages, food, safety, services is actually better for the average Venezuelan. The capture broke one man's hold on the presidency. It has not yet broken the system he ran. Which leaves the question that started all of this. Was the capture good or bad for Venezuela? 6 months in, that answer is genuinely not written yet. It depends on whether an expired interim mandate turns into an election or into entrenchment. Watch 3 things: whether a vote gets a date, whether Machado can come home, and whether the remaining prisoners walk free without conditions. Those are the tests that separate a transition from a change of management.